Let's talk about revision and editing. The purpose of revision is reorganization and refinement of an essay. Most writers have their own revision process, and you too will develop your own series of steps. Do not try to revise your thesis, introduction, or conclusion until after the rough draft stage. It's just a waste of time. You will need to revise anyway. Just write your rough draft, then revise. Here are some tips. Try to finish the rough draft a day or two before you need to revise. This puts some time and space between you and your creation. Read your paper aloud. This lets you hear it the way an audience would hear it. You'll catch several small errors this way because they just won't sound right. Let someone objective read your paper. A classmate or a friend are the ideal readers. Parents tend to be overly harsh or overly gushy with their praise. Teachers tend to take the paper apart. At this stage, they have no idea what you are trying to say. You are the only one who knows. But don't get defensive. Listen and take all points into consideration. Here are a few more tips. Develop a revision checklist. Study several and devise the one that works best for you. Understand that revision does not simply mean changing a few words. This process takes more than a few minutes. You should spend time revising because revising is what will assure you of the grade or response that you want. Remember to consider the assignment. Watch the word count or the page count requested. Here's my revision strategy. I start with a wide angle and I narrow the focus. I always start by looking at the basic structure. Do I have an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion? That's pretty simple. Once I do that, I examine each structure point individually. Does the intro have a hook? Is the hook followed by a bridge or a trail of information that leads me to the thesis? Do I have my thesis in the proper spot? Do my body paragraphs follow the introduction? Does each body paragraph begin with a topic sentence? Is it followed by my evidence and analysis of that topic? Do I end each body paragraph with some small link or connection back to the thesis? Does my conclusion restate my thesis? Does it effectively conclude the paper by answering the so what question? Once I have answered those basic questions, I go a bit deeper. Does my thesis make sense? Is it specific, substantial, and contestable? Is it explained in the body paragraphs? Sometimes the body paragraphs will highlight something that needs to be expressed in the thesis. If this happens to you, revise the thesis to express the material covered in the body paragraphs. This may mean a 1 or 2 word adjustment, but it may mean an entirely new thesis. In addition to checking the body paragraphs against the thesis, I also check the conclusion against the thesis. If the conclusion suggests an alternate viewpoint, I will then have a decision to make. Do I agree with the view expressed in the thesis, or do I agree with the view expressed in the conclusion? Whichever one you choose, you must change the other so that the paper is uniform and coherent. I have read and written many essays where the conclusions suggest something totally different than the thesis. Once the thesis has been checked against the body paragraphs and conclusion, and any necessary revision has taken place, half of the revision work is done. Now that your thesis is set in stone, you're ready to begin work on each individual part of the essay. The introduction. Does the hook really work? Do I have enough information to take me from the hook to the thesis? Are there too many details from the hook to the thesis? You do not want to list things in your intro that you will be including in body paragraphs in detail. Does each body paragraph open with the topic sentence? Is the evidence logical? Does my analysis prove the point that I'm trying to make while also staying true to the evidence? Does my analysis lead easily to the last sentence in the paragraph, which will link me back to the thesis? Does my conclusion offer new points? If so, I need to put those in my body paragraphs or delete them from the paper. Does it gently restate the thesis? Does it offer the reader some proof of the thesis? Does it answer the all-important so what question. Once I have made changes to the overall structure, essay, and then reviewed and changed the individual parts of the structure, paragraphs, and moved to my final revision act, sentence structure. Sentence structure is an easy task. The main thing I look for here is repetitiveness and redundancy. I want to be sure that I have not repeated the same word 30 times. Words such as even and just and is, they're very common repetitive problems. I also want to make sure that I have not repeated the same idea over and over and over, just using different words. The sentence revision performs two functions as the last step in your revising strategy. It clears up any final problems in your writing, number one, and it leads to the editing portion of the paper, number two. Here's an important thing to remember. Don't let any time lapse between revision and editing. Once you have completely revised, you might want to print another rough draft out for editing. After you have done 4 or 5 papers, you may be able to do this on the computer without a printed copy. With editing, I start small focus and move to the wide angle. I begin with sentences. Here's a list of things you should be concerned about. Word choice, subject-verb agreement, spelling, pronoun agreement, pronoun reference, modifier problems, passive versus active voice, punctuation, particularly commas, and citing sources. Once you have examined each sentence for these problems and corrected these problems, you then move on to the wider issues. Is each paragraph indented? Is the spacing correct? Are your margins in line with instructor specifications? Do you have a title? Is it relevant? Are page numbers in place according to specified guidelines? Is your name and information on the paper in the right spot? Once all of that's been verified or corrected, print the final draft of the paper. Review this paper in its printed version prior to turning it in. You may still find an error. Staple it in the upper left-hand corner unless you are asked to place in a folder and turn it in. Congratulations. You can now breathe for a day or two until your next assignment.